A story about an attack on personal boundaries and time from relatives, a funny story. Family, you can't live with them and you can't live without them, or at least that's how the saying goes. In my case, it's more like you can't live with them, but you really wish they'd stop trying to live with you. I love my relatives, truly, but I prefer to love them from a comfortable distance, ideally with a good Wi Fi connection between us and a significant number of miles. The problem isn't that they're bad people, they're not. The issue is that for some inexplicable reason, none of them seem to understand or respect the concept of personal boundaries. It's as if they think that because we share some strands of DNA, that gives them an all-access pass to my life, my time, and my personal space. Unfortunately for them, and for me, I'm not a fan of unannounced drop-ins or spontaneous weekend hijackings. Take my aunt, for example. She's the kind of person who will pop into your life like an unwanted notification on your phone, loud, insistent, and completely oblivious to the fact that you're trying to mind your own business. The worst part? You can't swipe her away. Not too long ago, shortly after my husband and I got married, Aunt Lydia decided it would be a grand idea to pay us a visit. We were newlyweds, still in that blissful phase where we were figuring out how to coexist in the same space without annoying each other too much. We were looking forward to a quiet weekend together, just the two of us. But, as you might have guessed, Aunt Lydia had other plans. She called me early one Saturday morning, her voice brimming with the kind of enthusiasm only she could muster at such an ungodly hour. "I'm passing through your town today," she announced, as if she were the queen and I should be rolling out the red carpet. "I'll stop by for a visit." Now, if I were a different person, I might have found a way to politely decline. But I'm not, and the idea of dealing with the fallout from my mother, who would undoubtedly hear about this snub within minutes, made my stomach turn. So I reluctantly agreed, even though I could practically feel my husband's mood souring from across the room. He was not thrilled about having our weekend plans disrupted, but I convinced him it would be fine. Just a short visit, some tea, some cake, and she'd be on her way. The next few hours were a blur of frenzied activity. I raced around the kitchen, whipping up something that I hoped would pass as an impressive enough spread for Aunt Lydia to relay back to the rest of the family without making me sound like a terrible hostess. My husband, on the other hand, was determined to squeeze in as much sleep as he could before our weekend was officially hijacked. Just as I was putting the finishing touches on a pie, my phone rang. It was Aunt Lydia, of course, and she was already at the station, but instead of the expected, "I'm on my way" or "see you soon," she had a demand. "Come pick me up at the station," she said, her tone implying that this was not a request but an order. I stared at the phone in disbelief. "Aunt Lydia, I'm in the middle of cooking. Why don't you just grab a taxi? It's not far from here." There was a pause, followed by a tirade that could have peeled paint off the walls. "You don't respect me at all, do you? My daughter would never treat me this way. How dare you tell me to take a taxi? I raised you better than this." I could feel my blood pressure rising with each word. Her daughter, by the way, was the most high-maintenance person I knew, someone who had been known to throw a fit if she didn't get her way. So the comparison wasn't exactly flattering. "Aunt Lydia," I began, struggling to keep my voice calm, "I'm really busy right now. If you don't want to take a taxi, maybe it's best if you don't come after all." Apparently, that was the wrong thing to say. She let out an indignant gasp, accused me of being ungrateful and disrespectful, and promptly hung up on me. We haven't spoken since. Part of me felt guilty for how things ended, but the other part was relieved. One less relative showing up uninvited. But if you thought Aunt Lydia was bad, wait until you hear about my mother-in-law. When my husband and I found our dream home, one of the selling points was its proximity to his mother's house. It was close enough that we could easily visit her when we wanted, but far enough that we thought we'd have some semblance of privacy. Or so we thought. At first, it seemed like a blessing. My mother-in-law was friendly, helpful, and always ready with a fresh batch of cookies. But then she started showing up unannounced. At first, it was just once in a while, bringing over a pie or some leftovers. But as time went on, her visits became more frequent, and before we knew it, they were a regular part of our weekend routine. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of a relaxing weekend, it doesn't involve getting up early to entertain surprise guests. My ideal weekend involves sleeping in, maybe having a lazy breakfast, and spending quality time with my husband. But my mother-in-law had other ideas. Every Saturday morning, like clockwork, she would show up at our door, a freshly baked cake in hand, ready to have coffee with us. It didn't matter if we were still in our pajamas, if the house was a mess, or if we had other plans. She was there, and she wasn't leaving until we sat down and had coffee with her. The first few times I tried to go along with it, thinking it was just a phase. Maybe she was lonely, or maybe she just really enjoyed our company. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that this was her new routine, and it wasn't going to change unless I did something about it. My husband, bless his heart, tried to make the best of it. He didn't want to hurt his mother's feelings, and he knew that I was getting increasingly frustrated, but I could see the toll it was taking on him too. We both worked hard all week, and our weekends were supposed to be our time to unwind. Instead, we were entertaining his mother, who had decided that our home was an extension of hers. Finally, after yet another Saturday morning coffee session, I decided I'd had enough. I couldn't keep pretending that this was okay, that I was fine with our weekends being hijacked by my mother-in-law. I needed to set some boundaries, and I needed to do it now. So the next time she showed up at our door with her cheery smile and a freshly baked pie, I didn't bother with hints or polite excuses. I told her, as kindly as I could, that we appreciated her baking and her visits, but that we really needed our weekends to ourselves. I explained that we were often tired from the week and that our weekends were our time to rest and recharge. She looked at me as if I had just told her that I hated pie. Her smile faltered, and for a moment I thought she might burst into tears right there on our doorstep. "But I just wanted to spend time with you two," she said, her voice wavering. "I know," I replied gently, "and we love spending time with you too. But we need some time to ourselves as well. Maybe we can set up a regular time to get together during the week." She nodded slowly, clearly not thrilled with the idea, but understanding where I was coming from. She agreed to cut back on the weekend visits, and after a slightly awkward goodbye, she left. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Finally, I had taken a stand, set a boundary, and it seemed like she was going to respect it. But little did I know, my victory was about to be short-lived. For a few blissful weeks, my husband and I enjoyed our peaceful, uninterrupted weekends. We slept in, we lazed around the house, and we finally got to enjoy our new home the way we had always envisioned. It was everything we had wanted. But then something strange started happening. It began with small things: a loaf of freshly baked bread left on our doorstep, a vase of flowers mysteriously appearing on our porch. At first, I thought maybe it was my mother-in-law's way of apologizing for her previous invasions. But as the gifts kept coming, I started to get suspicious. One Saturday morning, as I was lounging in my bathrobe with a cup of coffee, I noticed something peculiar out of the corner of my eye. Peeking through the curtains, I saw a familiar figure hurriedly placing a basket of muffins on our porch before quickly scurrying away. It was my mother-in-law. I couldn't believe it. She had agreed to cut back on her visits, but instead she had resorted to stealthily delivering baked goods to our doorstep like some kind of pastry ninja. I didn't know whether to be amused or annoyed. When I told my husband what I had seen, he couldn't stop laughing. "She just can't help herself," he said, shaking his head. "She loves you too much to stay away." While it was hard to stay mad at someone who was literally showering us with baked goods, I knew I needed to address this before it got out of hand. The next time I saw her, I gently brought it up. "You know, you don't have to leave things on our porch," I said, trying to keep the conversation light. "If you want to drop something off, just give us a call first. We'd love to see you." She blushed, clearly embarrassed that I had caught her in the act. "I just didn't want to intrude," she explained, "but I like knowing you're taken care of." I smiled, appreciating the sentiment, but I also reiterated the importance of boundaries. We agreed that if she wanted to bring something over, she'd call or text first. No more surprise deliveries. Things seemed to settle down after that, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still one more twist in store. And I was right. One quiet Saturday afternoon, when my husband and I were relaxing in the backyard, we heard a knock at the door. Assuming it was another one of my mother-in-law's surprise visits, my husband went to answer it, only to return moments later with a puzzled expression. "It's for you," he said, holding out a small envelope. Curious, I took the envelope and opened it. Inside was an invitation to a surprise family reunion that I apparently was supposed to help plan. And the kicker, it was scheduled for the following weekend, right in our backyard. My aunt, my mother-in-law, and various other relatives had conspired to host a massive family gathering at our house, all without telling me. And now they were expecting me to step up as the host. I stared at the invitation, my mind racing. This was the final straw. My relatives had crossed the line too many times, and now they were trying to commandeer my home for a family reunion that I hadn't even agreed to. If they thought they could walk all over me, they were sorely mistaken. But instead of getting angry, I decided to get creative. If they wanted a family reunion at my house, then I would give them one they'd never forget. The week leading up to the reunion, I pretended to go along with their plan. I made a few calls, confirming details, and acted like I was fully on board. But behind the scenes, I was plotting something entirely different. On the day of the reunion, my husband and I woke up early and put my plan into action. We transformed our backyard into a tropical paradise, complete with inflatable palm trees, tiki torches, and a giant kiddie pool filled with sand. We even rented a few beach chairs and placed them strategically around the yard. When my aunt, my mother-in-law, and the rest of the family arrived, they were greeted with leis, Hawaiian shirts, and fruity cocktails served in coconuts. I could see the confusion on their faces as they tried to reconcile the laid-back, beachy vibe with the formal family reunion they had envisioned. "Welcome to our tropical family reunion," I announced with a grin, handing each of them a lei as they walked in. My aunt looked around, clearly baffled. "This isn't what we planned," she said, frowning. "No, it's not," I replied cheerfully. "But since this is my home, I thought I'd add a little twist. Relax, have some fun. You might as well enjoy it." My husband, who had been in on the plan from the start, played the perfect host, handing out drinks and encouraging everyone to join in the fun. Some of the relatives, especially the younger ones, quickly embraced the theme, kicking off their shoes and lounging in the beach chairs. Others, like my aunt, took a little longer to warm up to the idea. But as the day went on, I could see the tension melting away. My aunt eventually joined a game of beach volleyball. My mother-in-law relaxed in one of the beach chairs. And even the grumpiest of relatives couldn't resist the festive atmosphere. By the time the sun began to set, everyone was in high spirits, and the family reunion that had started as a potential disaster had turned into a surprisingly enjoyable day. As I watched my relatives laughing and chatting, I realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to set boundaries while still finding room for compromise. The success of the tropical family reunion taught me something important. Boundaries didn't have to be rigid and unyielding. Sometimes all it took was a little creativity, a touch of humor, and a willingness to find a middle ground. After the reunion, I sat down with my husband and had a heart-to-heart about our boundaries with our relatives. We both agreed that while we loved our families, we needed to prioritize our own needs and our relationship. We came up with a few ground rules: no unannounced visits, no surprise events, and most importantly, no using guilt or manipulation to get their way. We also decided to take a proactive approach to family gatherings. Instead of waiting for our relatives to impose their plans on us, we would take the initiative and suggest activities or get-togethers that we were comfortable with. This way, we could still spend time with our families without feeling overwhelmed or intruded upon. As for my mother-in-law, I made an effort to include her in our lives in a way that respected our boundaries. We set up regular weekly visits for coffee and catch-ups, and I even suggested a monthly family dinner where she could bake to her heart's content. With clear expectations in place, our relationship improved significantly. My aunt, on the other hand, took a little longer to come around, but after seeing how much fun everyone had at the tropical family reunion, she couldn't deny that sometimes a little change was good. She stopped making demands and started being more considerate of our time and space. In the end, I realized that while I couldn't change my relatives, I could change the way I responded to them. By setting boundaries with kindness, creativity, and a touch of humor, I found a way to maintain my sanity while still keeping my family close. Life with relatives will never be perfect, but at least now I know that with the right approach, it can be a whole lot more enjoyable. And who knows? Maybe the next family reunion will have a theme too. Pirate party, anyone?